67 of the ITSM crowd. My name's Claire Agutter, and today I am joined by 3 VeriSM early adopters who are going to be sharing their VeriSM stories and hopefully inspiring you a little bit to take a look at VeriSM and see what it can do for your organisation. First thing I'm going to do is ask our guests to introduce themselves. So starting with David, please, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name's David Barrow. I'm an independent service management consultant. I've spent a good 20 odd plus years working across service management and service desk roles for a variety of companies before I went out on my own about 5 years ago. In that time, I've obviously been looking for ways to do the role individually, to influence and to sort of carry that with as an individual, but also to quickly integrate into teams and organizations. And so a couple of years ago, VeriSM became one of those streams that I've been using to help me to get involved and to get the message about IT service management across to my clients.
Thank you very much. And Steve.
Thank you, Claire. Good afternoon, everyone. Steve Leach here from Cloud Gateway. I used to introduce myself as the head of service management, but as I approach a well-deserved retirement, I've downsized to just a service manager. I'm working part-time. I've been in and around IT service management, like David, probably even longer, about 30 years, back to the days of ITIL 1, if anybody could ever remember that with those shiny.
Wow.
And a couple of years ago, I joined Cloud Gateway, which was at the time was a very small startup in London. And I needed a new technique, some methodology, some way of creating a fit-for-purpose service management model. And VeriSM just ticked every box. And as the other people on this call will vouch for, I got very excited about it, became a bit of an evangelist, and we've implemented it in Cloud Gateway. And it really has made a difference to how we work and how we deliver, how we get our products to the market. And I've got an interesting story about how it works. But for the moment, I'll hand back to you, Claire.
Thank you very much. And joining us at the very last minute after a bit of a broadband dropout. It's lovely to see you, Claire. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, Claire. Yeah, there's no guarantee that I won't drop out again because you can really sort of tell there's a lot of traffic on our network at the moment, obviously, due to obvious reasons. So I'm Clare McAleese. I work at MasterCard. I've been in the service management industry probably for about 20 years or so. So I've sort of gone through the sort of obvious channels in terms of service desk, and then I actually worked with Claire. Not sure how many years ago now, but
let's gloss over that.
Yeah, just like at the Highways Agency, and I worked on the service desk there, and then Claire left, and I stepped into Claire's difficult to fill shoes as change manager at the Highways Agency. And then after about 5 years, I then moved to what was then Vocalink, who have probably about 2 years ago been acquired by MasterCard. So we're now actually called Vocalink, a MasterCard company. So over the past probably about the past 5 years, I've been a big advocate of continual improvement and looking at how we can look at service management more holistically at an enterprise level. And really, it was difficult to sort of see how we could make that work. And then VeriSM came along. So speaking to Claire, and then being honoured to be asked to be a contributor to the books, the Foundation and the Unwrapped and Applied books. So I got to work with an amazing community of industry experts, and I was luckily, I don't know whether that's the right word, asked to present at the launch of the VeriSM book in Estonia, in Tallinn, which was a really petrifying experience because doing large presentations like that is not my forte, but I came through it, and I think it's really sort of boosted my my confidence really in terms of being involved in service management. As a result, I've now moved into more the strategic level of service management, which means that I'm in a very, very good position now to actually move forward and implement VeriSM, albeit not calling it VeriSM specifically, but more of being a framework which blends and brings together, frameworks and management practices and technologies, which is exactly what what VeriSM is about. So that's really the background of how I'm here.
Fantastic. Thank you all very
Thank
much.
you.
So just a reminder to the people who are watching us live, we can see your questions if you put them into the YouTube comments. If you're watching this live and you have a question that you'd like to ask Claire or David or Steve, just pop it into YouTube comments. We'll see that immediately, and we have the option to answer that while we're watching the broadcast. If you're on catch up, can't help you there, I'm afraid, but you can follow the ITSM Crowd hashtag on Twitter, and if you tweet us with the hashtag, we will pick that up. So we do have the facility to take questions after the broadcast finishes as well. A quick definition and a bit of context to begin with before I start to ask our panel to share a little bit more about their experiences. So VeriSM, if you've not come across it before, is a service management approach for the digital age. You can find a lot of information about VeriSM on this website, verism.global. I was the chief architect for VeriSM, so I've been lucky enough to spend time with all of our panel before, and some of them have been contributors to the books. And with VeriSM, what we were looking at doing was creating a service management approach that went beyond the IT department, supported organisations looking at product management and digital products and services, and really helped them to integrate a lot of the new ways of working that are coming into organisations as well. So how do you blend an agile approach with your existing service management capabilities? How do you make sure things like your financial processes are actually supporting you in iterative development and more rapid ways of working? So lots of good information on the VeriSM website, and there are the VeriSM publications as well. But the focus for today is for our three guests just to share a little bit about what they've been doing with VeriSM in the organisations that they work with, and hopefully to give you some tips on where you might get started as well, and what kind of problems VeriSM can solve for you. So David, I think I'm going to come to you first, please. If you can just share a little bit about your story of working with VeriSM.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I've been sort of working with VeriSM now for about 2 years. And I first discovered VeriSM by failing the exam. So I was in between contracts, thinking, okay, I have a thing that I do. I always try and learn something new between contracts, and I've been looking at VeriSM for quite a while. And I thought, okay, so that's something I'm gonna sit down and do. And as I read about it being IT service management for a digital age. Well, I work in service management. I've been doing it for 20 years. I won't even bother reading any of the course materials. I'll just take the exam and I'll pass it. And I failed. And that failure was really piqued my interest. I was like, okay, so what's different about this?
Mm-hmm.
That somebody, in my case, at the time, ITIL 3 was still the most recent version of ITIL. 2011 was the most recent version of ITIL. How can I have the credits I have in that and not be able to pass this simple foundation exam? And so I started reading about VeriSM an awful lot and started getting engaged. And I saw some of the discussions that Steve had kicked off. I'd seen some stuff from European Central Bank. I got spoken to Sigrid at Exim, and I was like, wow, I really need to get around to doing this. And I got a contract, so I didn't. And then one day I was sat in a contract with a financial services organization, a global organization, and we were talking about their digital transformation. And in my head, I was thinking, that VeriSM that I've been looking at, this could be very useful here.
Mm-hmm.
And then a question came out saying, has anybody heard of VeriSM? And I said, oh, I have. And so I had to start telling a very senior individual in this bank all about VeriSM in the back of my head, thinking I've not even passed the exam. So to get to the point, I went home, studied, passed the exam. And that's when I really started to see the news of VeriSM. And so I worked in a financial services organization where we were part of a program of work that was focused on quality. And that's looking at the quality of services from the consumer all the way in, from development, operational support, finance, HR. And what was really good about this particular engagement was we weren't treating IT as a part of the business. We were looking at the whole business.
Mm-hmm.
And so VeriSM as a framework really helped me apply some of the thinking. And not just myself, but the team I work with, and we each had our own different skills, but we all got what VeriSM is about, which is, as you say, Claire, it's about almost being agnostic in the processes and just applying what's best for you in your organization, and then looking at how that works for all the component parts of that organization. So we worked together with the leadership in this particular financial organization, firstly to establish the stakeholder map. We sought to understand who we needed to influence, and also who we needed to work with to carry that influence from the ground up. And we ended up in this fantastic scenario where we had buying at all levels of the organization, but it was still very much based on, well, that sounds good, but what does it deliver? So using the management mesh, we started to look at individual services and started to understand how those services look today. And we basically were able to get some proof of concept services.
Mm-hmm.
And these services that maybe had a digital front end, but had a much older back end and a series of dependencies that if one of those dependency fails, the end customer in a global organization can't get hold of their money, for example. And so using these prototypes, so to speak, or these
Mm-hmm.
proof of concepts, we were able to start demonstrating results. And how we did that using VeriSM, to cut to the point, is we focused in on what they really needed, what the outcomes really needed to be, and also on the culture and the development of the people supporting those services, and helping them understand that they didn't necessarily need to be this T-shaped individual that knew everything, that we could actually utilize their skills along and across the organization with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And we basically built, using the management mesh as always our sort of go-to point, our barometer as to where we were going. We're able to start improving things iteratively. So that might be a key stage in a process, or a key stage in a procurement activity, or a key stage in understanding which technologies we really needed to use. A really good example being somebody says in the business, we need this service and we need a new service. And we were able to say, by now understanding the key components of our services, well, actually, you already have that. You just don't utilize it in this manner. So we were able to start saving the business money, which
Mm-hmm.
they were very happy with, because they weren't having to reinvest in new technology, and they were able to understand that they already had emerging technology in another part of the finance business.
Mm-hmm.
But also we were able to start making people's lives easier. And we also chose services that seemingly were fantastic. They weren't read anywhere. They had the watermelon SLA effect,
Yeah.
where basically they were green on the outside, and if you started to scrape away, they were awfully red on the inside. We were able to capture those services prior to them going wrong,
Mm-hmm.
avert disaster. And so just through and did we always call it VeriSM? Maybe not, but we used the principles of VeriSM
Mm-hmm.
to start to establish our leadership. Our enterprise governance improved, and also we were able to start transforming services iteratively, or in some cases with new services in quite a large way. I've also used VeriSM, again, especially the management mesh, but in kicking off conversations with customers. So
Mm-hmm.
they'll speak to me about their challenge, and I'll seek to understand that and then break it down into the components of the management mesh. So as we know, the resources, the management practices, the environment and the technologies, and start to say to them, so you're here today,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll draw it out for them in a very, very rough mesh. I'm not a very good artist by any means, but then I'll be able to say, but you want to be here.
Yeah.
And so here's the steps that we need to take to get you there, whether it's investment or training or retraining. But I think the other key point about VeriSM is I'll also be able to say to them, you don't necessarily need to retrain, you just need to be adopting and adapting what you already have, especially around Agile, DevOps and Lean and ITIL.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how long I've got, but I'll stop in a moment. But essentially, I've been able to use it in now 3 different companies, all of a different nature. Because the great thing about VeriSM is it's not IT, it's the company as a whole, and that has been key for me in being able to speak across that business and to speak to HR and say, this is not an IT practice, this is a right practice for your business. And I think that's where I've really seen the results and increased engagement.
That's awesome. Thank you. So I'm going to come across to you next, Claire, because you're also in a financial services organisation. So if you can share a little bit about your story, and is it similar to David's or is it different? That would be really helpful. Can't hear you, Claire.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, somebody was putting the bin out. Yeah, so thank you. So I've actually been having a couple of conversations with David just recently, following the recent VeriSM 10 Steps implementation webinar. And I was very keen to speak to David because of obviously the similarities in the fact that we're both in finance. And I was really keen to see the practical implementation of the management mesh, because that is one aspect that we haven't quite managed to implement and really get off the ground and integrate into business as usual. But we are looking to do that. We're certainly not saying that we're not. But I think in terms of the approach that I took in implementing VeriSM, I would definitely do things differently in hindsight now. And I think from talking to David again, and also from speaking to Steve and Scott, I think that the one of the key things is to demonstrate results. Start small, demonstrate results, build the confidence, and then roll it out from there. What I did was I was very enthusiastic, very excited because of this new book, and I could see the relevance to our business. And I was, waving this book around, saying, "This is really, really interesting." And I spoke to the management. I spoke to the CEO of our organisation. I managed to get a presentation with him. He was so interested and could see the relevance of this to our business, and how this could help us with delivering services through digital transformation. But it was very high level. It was saying the right things, but it wasn't actually demonstrating how we were actually implementing that in practice. And so then the next stage, so it was almost like we started off at the top, we got buy-in, got very positive responses, but then it was a case of going back down, sort of looking at bottom up. And looking at, what could we actually do to demonstrate, the benefits. And I think from what David was saying before as well, VeriSM is, it's certainly what was missing for a number of years. And I think we can, without mentioning it, think of something that wasn't renewed for quite a long time. And I
know what you mean.
So I think, so this came along at the right time. We could see that it was addressing, the new ways of working, agile, DevOps, the technologies, focusing on value. But as I say, it was a case of how do we actually demonstrate that? And as one of our senior execs said, the rubber has to hit the road. You know, we really do need to see some tangible evidence. So we went off with a colleague of mine who's really an advocate for VeriSM as well, and we did some workshops. We worked through the management mesh. We looked at service implementations and lessons learned from previous service implementations to show the benefits of VeriSM, and overlaying this over existing frameworks, including not just Agile and ITIL, but also our operating model. You know, to show that actually there is room for improvement in terms of service management at that enterprise level, in helping to, you know, deliver our products and services, and look at optimizing our service offerings, commercializing, and making sure that lessons learned were addressed throughout the whole value stream, you know, not just at the end in the run aspect, or, you know, within the deliver, but that we were considering these things at the very, very beginning, at the inception stage, and we were actually being proactive and asking the right questions in terms of what are we looking at in terms of environment, you know, in terms of resources, emerging technology, management practices, looking at how we can blend the, you know, the capabilities and where the gaps are. So in terms of a practical example of how we've implemented and got that traction, was looking at the continual improvement process, funnily enough, because we had one, but we'd had a few attempts at it, but it was very siloed within one particular area, and it wasn't enterprise wide, and it wasn't through the value stream. It was focusing just at the run aspect. So there were a lot of lessons learned that were and issues that were happening further upstream that weren't necessarily being you know, sort of factored in. So that was something that I've done, is created a continual improvement process, you know, considering the concepts of VeriSM to have something that was fit for purpose across the enterprise, you know, that we could use really and implement by value stream rather than across the board. So it was you know, it was looking at it sort of focusing on the value stream. So that is up and running, and where we are now, really quickly, and just to finish off, we are now at the stage probably where David started. Now we're actually getting to that point, is piloting a new product using this new approach to service management by introducing Agile service management framework. That's what we've called it, which is framework agnostic. So we've got aspects of VeriSM in there, we've got the management mesh in there, we've got the unified value cycle in there, which I'm not sure if everybody's heard that Simon Kent's looking at. So we've brought in aspects of that. We've got ITIL 4 in there. We've created a framework that's got quality gates in there, and after speaking to David, we had a really good conversation early, was it this week or last week?
Last week, yeah.
And considered how could we use the management mesh actually within the quality gates between the stages of that framework. So there's lots of interesting you know, developments, and it's ongoing, and it's definitely gathering that momentum. We've got sponsorship from the CEO, investment. We've trained up people on VeriSM and ITIL. So it's heading in a good direction.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Claire.
You.
I'm starting to think I should have given you all 30 minutes each, because
sorry.
There's so much good stuff. But equally, I want Steve to have his moment in the sun as well, because I know Steve's got some really good stories to tell, and it has some relevance for the kind of the coronavirus situation as well. So take us away, Steve.
All right, and obviously a very good ringtone as well on my phone. Good afternoon, everyone. I love hearing these stories, because from the likes of Claire and David, my arrival into the VeriSM world, if you want to call that, couldn't have been different. I was about the 5th employee of a very small cloud computing startup company, but we were ambitious. We wanted to grow. We knew we'd get more customers. We knew we'd have products to sell. So I was able to start to build a fit for purpose support model with no previous sort of views of what was right and what was wrong, to start with what was fit for purpose and what suited our business. Sort of a right-sized one, if you like, from the word go. Literally a blank piece of paper. So I started to look around at ITIL and various other things, and then VeriSM came along. I was introduced to it by a friend, and quickly got in touch with Claire to find more about it. And what I realized straight away was that in a small startup, you can't have vertical silos. You can't have the sales and marketing people not speaking to the finance, not speaking to us in support, not speaking to the development engineers, because every single thing we do will influence everybody else in a small company. So we were already siloless, which meant implementing VeriSM, you know, the old message would be get CEO buy-in. That wasn't even an issue. The CEO just told me to go and do it. So, you know, if you're coming from a big company, I realize you've got much more challenges than that. But when there's only 10 of you and you're already all on the same page, it's much, much easier to implement it. And so that proved. So we were able to establish a few very simple governance rules, establish a few very simple but relevant service management principles as our guardrails, and then start to populate the management mesh. And I think I'd like to focus on that for a moment, if you don't mind, Claire, because the management mesh, I know there's been various sessions. I know Suzanne's given some, and there's been various others, but the management mesh is a different beast. There's no one size fits all. It has to be different to each company. I can see you nodding, David. That's just so true, isn't it?
So true.
I mean, the management mesh I've got up on my other screen here looks probably nothing like yours. But what I managed to do with it, and pinching a bit of Claire's ideas there, continual service improvement, there's lots of things you can do with the mesh. One of the things I did, by regularly talking to the heads of sales and marketing, development, commercial, and myself in support, you know, the key building blocks of the organization, each one of us had staff, each one of us had different things we were looking to do. And what we wanted was a group of fully trained people, totally responsive. So I came up with the idea of what we called a mini mesh. So, for example, go and see the DevOps people and just literally put the circle round and cut and paste anything on your management mesh that's relevant to the DevOps staff or to anybody who's developing and building your products. Then you can sit with them and find out what it is that they want to populate the mesh with, make sure it's up to date, make sure it suits them, and they can focus on their bit without being cluttered by what you're doing in the other areas. And then I color coded it, literally good old red, amber, and green. Anything red was a skill I needed, I hadn't even managed. Well, I said we've got, but we could be better. And anything green was, oh, we've got some recognized industry experts in that, and we had. Now, in any area, the combinations of red, amber, and green are different. So what I do, I present it to the senior management team once a month with a view to turning reds to amber and ambers to green. But then, of course, in the dynamic world we're in then, let alone the one we're in now, something will come along out of left field that he wasn't even on the mesh before. So it's never static, it's never still. But by focusing on areas that were of interest to individual line managers, by color coding it, and by making them realize that whatever was in there was going to influence the rest of the business, the management mesh has become kind of a living and breathing tool. Now, I did try and get really clever and go to HR and build the mesh into their recruiting process, but they either weren't having that or they didn't get that. I think I was trying to be a bit too clever there, so I'll strike that one off. But the mesh, and obviously occasional updates to my end-to-end VeriSM model, but the mesh has been the thing that's, I think, I've found most useful, most interesting, most challenging as well, but it's definitely the thing I've focused on in the last few months.
I love it.
How long have I got, Claire?
Oh, about a minute.
Right. Do you want me to go into the how the current environment is being, or do you want me to leave that and you'll summarize that at the end?
No, by all means, please do. So I think we can overrun by 5 minutes today if everybody's okay with that.
Okay, that's good. I want to hear it.
All right. This is something that I'm very, very pleased to be able to say. I'm very proud of. Now, if you look at the environmental axis on the management mesh, it doesn't say pandemic or national crisis, but my God, that is a business driver that's driven the coach and horses right through the middle of our management mesh. Now, if you accept that the R in VeriSM stands for responsive, I mean, I'm 65 years old. I've been in work for 40 or 50 years. I've never known a time when the need to respond to change has been more important than it is now. So with our operating model underpinned by VeriSM, with the way we work together and with the business needs, we've actually managed to rationalize and optimize our onboarding processes. For instance, a genuine story, obviously I won't mention any names. we were able to turn an inquiry onto our website into a fully onboarded and supported customer with the technology to deliver video conferencing to all their home workers in 5 days. That's 5 days from an entry on the website to actually a customer ringing up and say, yes, this is now working. And that means that the NHS workers at home can now take advantage of secure and understandable, usable connectivity, because the key to this was having a really flexible organization. Now, I'm not going to claim that VeriSM is helping me save lives. That would be taking a step too far. But it's helping us have an organization that's flexible enough. Some of you may know this acronym. HSCN stands for the Health and Social Care Network. That's the network that all the NHS workers and the NHS various suppliers and ourselves in Cloud Gateway need to be accredited to. Now, we got that accreditation over a year ago for a different customer before there was a crisis. So we were ideally positioned to this. So just to summarize, I believe that there's in a time of absolute crisis, when we're all trying to help each other out, we're able to do our bit. VeriSM has helped, the connectivity to that network has helped. And unfortunately, the tragic situation we find ourselves in means that we are able to respond as quickly as the public and the NHS now need. And we've actually got some products up there being used, all underpinned by the VeriSM model, which you were kind of rewriting each day as we learn new things. So I think I'd just like to finish on that note, Claire, that 2 years ago, VeriSM was a concept. I'm thinking, yep, I'm going to implement this. I'm going to use the management mesh, but it's actually helped us position ourselves to be able to help the NHS and the public. And okay, if we end up getting a few extra customers as well, then that's no bad thing either. So that's about where we are, Claire.
And that is genuinely really inspiring to hear. So I do really appreciate you sharing that with us. We have run slightly over, which is good because we've been talking about really interesting things, but I am conscious of keeping this to our time slot. Claire, David and Steve are all on social media, so you can follow up with them or come to me and I'll follow up if there's any questions that you want answering. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about VeriSM, we do have a free e-learning course on the ITSM Zone website, so by all means go on and have a little look of that and you'll get kind of the basic concepts. You'll learn a bit more about the management mesh. And our next ITSM Crowd episode is on the 27th of April. So it's 10 a.m. British summer time, and I'm going to be joined by some education experts, so Sandra Whittleston and Barry Carless. We're going to be talking about building service management education into the national education system. So starting at schools, into universities, what do we need to do to get people ready for the world of work? So I'm going to say we didn't cover everything that I wanted to, but thank you so much to the panel today for sharing those stories. I found it really, really inspiring. I hope you'll find it useful, and it does just make you want to go dig into VeriSM a little bit more deeply. So thank you very much, David, Claire, Steve, and I will see everybody on the next episode of the ITSM Crowd. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.